This morning, the Taoiseach and leader of the Labour Party had the audacity to suggest that the €5 a month increase in child benefit is in recognition of the sacrifices made by families over the last 6 years. So the Taoiseach and leader of the Labour Party insults the women and children of this country by putting a value of a paltry €5 per month per child on the 6 years of savage austerity that they have suffered as a result of the policy of first Fianna Fáil and the Green Party, and now Fine Gael and Labour. So let's sum up the last 6 years. The bankers and bondholders who speculated wildly and crashed the economy got €60 billion reward. The developers in Nama, who played a major part in the crash, many get 200,000 plus a year. But the women and children get €5 a month. It really does sum up the priorities of this government and how out of touch they are. Budget 2015 is a deeply cynical budget. It's designed to boost the government's propaganda offensive of the last 6 months, that austerity is finished, that we are in an era of recovery, that the government has been vindicated in its actions over the last 3.5 years of continuing the slavish implementation of the Troika diktat, which is summed up, of course, that the ordinary people of Ireland should rescue the European financial market system by bailing out its biggest banks and bondholders from their disastrous speculation in the Irish property bubble. Austerity is not finished, of course. It is embedded in every pore of the public services, in the savage attacks on living standards of low and middle income workers, in the attacks on social welfare recipients, and shamefully in many cuts, for example, to the respite care grant for carers. And the government, without blushing apparently, this morning stands up and says that in 2015 it will set up a low-pay commission. 4 years into its term of office, it will set up a low-pay commission. It's quite incredible. Now, to bolster the idea that the government has brought austerity to an end, we are treated to a few partial reversal measures, totally minuscule in their scale, more insulting, in fact, than anything else. A quarter of the Christmas bonus. Won't even buy the turkey. So the budget is deeply cynical and deeply dishonest, especially because the second biggest austerity attack on households in the course of the whole austerity era, in the form of water charges, is totally disappeared in the government's propaganda. 2 major tomes were distributed yesterday by the Minister for Finance and the Minister for Public Spending. And each of them essentially colludes to cover up the reality of what families will face over the next period of time because of the water charges. Example 6, when we look at it, shows us the reality. A single worker on the minimum wage, which is a paltry living amount to live on. The changes to universal charge will mean an annual gain of €173. Irish Water says that its bill for this single worker will be €176 per year. There's not a word about that in this propaganda tome here. I have modified another example to give the reality for a family. Two parents, one on 35,000, one on 20,000 per annum, with two children of 18 or over, perhaps college students. Their net gain, according to the government, would be €354. But Irish Water says that their bill will be €483. Completely and utterly wipes out, even with this paltry attempt at a concession. And of course, the attack would be much deeper than that, because Irish Water has seriously underestimated the amount of water that households will use. And I've demonstrated that in the facts and figures by comparison with the studies that have been done by the Department of the Environment and others. And that is why I interjected yesterday when the Minister for Finance was speaking about the minor tax credit for water charges, and I said it won't save you. And it was directed at the Fine Gael and Labour parties, but particularly at Labour, because your panic measures to try and pretend that you are seriously alleviating the burden of water charges will not save you from the wrath that is out there in society. The 100,000 people who poured onto the streets of Dublin last Saturday should make you afraid. And the result of Friday's by-elections in Roscommon, South Leitrim and in Dublin South West should make you very afraid. The sending of Paul Murphy, the Anti-Austerity Alliance candidate, to represent the massive opposition to water charges in Dublin South West is merely representative of the feeling of communities right around the country. In January 2015, you will face a massive boycott of the water charges, the length and breadth of this country. In the 1990s, Fine Gael and the Labour government faced a boycott and a campaign in half of Dublin. But even then, people power, people mobilisation and political pressure forced the abolition of this hated tax, announced in December of 1996. In 2014-15, you face a revolt that is at a massively higher scale, nationwide. What will you do when you are faced with hundreds of thousands of householders who correctly, seeing the injustice of this, absolutely refuse to pay? Will Irish Water arrive in estates to turn down the pressure? What happens when communities come out rightly to stop them doing that? Will you flood the communities with Gardaí? And if they succeed, active campaigns will turn people back on overnight, so you won't intimidate people with this method. Will you bring thousands to the courts for simple contract debts? Will you set up special water courts? Because you won't be able to deal with the level of opposition, and you face a general election within 12 months. And the smirk will be smiled from your face, Minister O'Riordan, in the case of the Labour Party, because you will be wiped out at the general election if you persist with this unjust, disgraceful new attack on those who have carried all the burdens of the last 6 years.
Okay.
You will disappear, Minister. You will disappear. Listen to what I am saying. Moving on quickly, 10,000 houses, we are told, in 4 years, against 90,000 on the housing waiting list. The figures from the 1970s should put the Labour Party especially to absolute shame. In 1971, 4,789 homes could be built. That went up to 6,000 in 1973, and in 1975 was 8,794. So at a time of less wealth in our society, a government can build as many houses as you propose practically to do in 4 years, with the scale of the crisis massively greater. That just shows the utter failure of this government to resolve any of the crucial issues in our society.
Thank you, Deputy.
Happily, people are rising up against this horrific austerity, and you've only seen the very beginning of it.